There we go. I'd like to find some new music for next season, I think. Lots of good stuff going on. Apologies for just finding some bits of news that I needed to get sorted. We'll get rid of that. So we'll mute that just so it doesn't do anything silly. And we hit the button. And there we go. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing okay. So we'll give everyone another moment or two. Make sure if you haven't already, share the stream out. Get folk in. Let's have a good one. Let's see how many people we can get in tonight. Top off the season. Bunch of stuff we've got to go through, of course, obviously. And like I say, we are not running away from any controversy. We are going to run headlong towards it. And that is what we... because if nothing else, I've caused enough chaos this year, so I might as well why shy away from it. I think it's probably the short version on that. Just checking just see if any other bits of news have come out that I haven't already got down to talk about. So obviously there's a few bits that we obviously need to discuss. Make sure you answer the warm-up question in the chat, which is who was your player of the weekend at Coventry. Lots of a few suggestions in there I can see already. A lot of you already cheating and putting more than one person. But when do I ever stick to the rules? So when, no reason not to do it yourself. My radiator behind me decided it's springing into life just as I want to talk. That's fantastic. Let's make sure everything is working on that end. We don't want what we had last time, of course, which was the stream dying in the middle of the warm-up. That's definitely not what we're after. Magico. Like I say, yeah, make sure you hit the... If you're on Twitter, make sure you retweet or share it on your whatever. I don't know. TikTok. I can't be doing with TikTok. I haven't got the energy or the inclination, I think, on that front. Either way, I said it at the weekend, and I do like it as a phrase because I do like my old Doctor Who. But it does need to. It's a very, very timely phrase, I think, sometimes, especially with the part of the year that we're at. It is the end, but the moment has been prepared for. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid and all beyond the binary. It is Wednesday night. It is 8 p.m. and welcome back once again to the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, here to take you through, and we've been taking you through for the last umpteen months, all the weird, wonderful and wacky stuff from across the National Ice Hockey League structure here in Great Britain. We focus on the National Division. That is our bread and butter. That is our home port. But of course, we take a moment to go through absolutely anything and everything from the National, as well as Division 1 and Division 2 in the north and in the south. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope nobody has got too big a case of the Coventry Blues on that front. Obviously, what a fantastic weekend many of us have just got back from. If you weren't able to enjoy it, if you weren't there in person, I'm sorry, but I hope you had a great weekend wherever you are. If you tuned into the streams from the Coventry weekend, I'll talk about all those bits, of course, tonight. We've got a lot of stuff to go through, Coventry weekend to go through. We'll give you talk you a little bit through my view of a few bits and pieces from inside the commentary box this past weekend, as I was up there, of course, with the guys from Drop the Puck and George Perrick, my co-commentator. What a legend that man is. We also got all the news that we need to go through, and of course we'll just go over a few little bits as well in terms of our plans for the summer here at BOTW. But first, we do need, of course, to do our usual little bits of housekeeping before we kick off too much. bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to the NIHL. You will get the end of 23-24 in traditional BOTW fashion. That will be curtain down. That's where we officially kind of close our coverage on the season. Curtain down is going to be a much more kind of a sort of a personal experience kind of thing. Here on the stream tonight is where we're going to go into the hard hockey talk, and then we'll kind of combine the two pieces together. So if you've missed this, or you end up reading one and not the other, this will be inside the inside curtain down as well. But curtain down is where I kind of talk about Coventry as a weekend, how that was. We'll talk about some general thoughts on the season and kind of the plans going forward in terms of what's going on there. I did do them last year, the BOTW Arbitrary End of Season Awards, where I just kind of make up a load of nonsense and then hand out awards to players for different things, because it's just a fun way. I just like doing a bit of a silly, irreverent way of looking back at the end of the season. That'll be coming, and of course, you can check back across all of the past seasons worth of stuff that I've been to with the Banners on the Road series, long form, in-depth looks at every game I've been to across the campaign, and Hockey Stories, new piece coming next week. Just because I did some work on it before Coventry, I did a little bit, tiny bit of work on it at Coventry, and now a bit afterwards that's coming for that as well. But I'll be looking to do some more Hockey Stories pieces across the summer. That's just a way to kind of fill some stuff in. But there's that 13 years worth of content over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. You of course can check all of our social bits and pieces. They're all down there in the description. That's the joy of YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, find out when we're going to be going live with bits and pieces, because the What's Current stream kind of slackens the schedule a little bit, but if we get more bonkers stuff like last summer, thanks Sheffield, then of course we will keep popping our heads above the parapet as much as we needed. We just don't go every week because we don't need to, because there's not hockey on to talk about, and I don't think you lot want that many shows hosted by me about Australian hockey, when you can go and check out Hockey Hype Australia and check out all of their stuff from down there. But check all the social links are in the description down below, as well as the link to our virtual busking hat at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW, and we're live on YouTube on Wednesday nights when we run, and that's the great thing about live YouTube, because we have the chat. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything you guys want to chuck in as we're chatting our way through the past weekend's worth of stuff. All we ask is that if you want to stick something in the chat, you do remember the golden rule here at BOTW, and that is DBAD. It's a good rule for life. DBAD, don't be a dick, be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings, and everybody is going to have a good time. We do need to start with a couple of bits of news that have come out today across in the NIHL. We'll have a quick look at the big bits of news that kind of popped up a little bit, and that is twofold. We got one big bit of transfer news and one really big bit of retirement news. And that big bit of retirement news is that we kind of wondered whether it was going to happen with his testimonial coming up, but the sloth is having a proper big long sleep. Ross Green will retire from hockey officially after the end of his testimonial game this coming Saturday in Milton Keynes. 554 games, 16 goals, 103 assists, and 359 penalty minutes for the MK Lightning between 2007 and 2024. That is a hell of a record with one club. So we do wish Ross all the very best. I did say earlier, I think that him and he should get Jay Green for his testimonial, and they just recreate the weird moment in Basingstoke where none of them wanted to be the last. They both wanted to be the last man to leave the ice, so they both just stood on the ice. And the Zamboni went round, and they were still stood on the ice, and they changed out their warm-up jerseys into their playing jerseys, and they were still stood on the ice right until the game started, which was just the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen in my life. But if you're going to recreate it, testimonial is the right time to do that. But either way, massive congratulations to Ross. Not the sort of player who gets a ton of praise, never a big flashy player, Ross Green, just to kind of run-of-the-mill, chugging along defenseman. But teams need that as well. You can't have a team on the back end of Malik Martellis. You can't have a team on the back end of Ross Greens. You need that mix of things. And he's been such a fantastic long-term servant of MK that he does. He's getting his just reward in terms of that testimonial. So got everybody in and around Milton Keynes, I'm sure, will be able to turn out, and enjoy themselves in his company before he calls time on hockey. As far as I'm aware, Tom Norton has his testimonial this at the back end of May. He's not retiring as far as I'm aware, or if not, he hasn't told me. So we will leave that one as it is there. But the big bit of transfer news in the national division that we've seen today, with all the chopping and changing that happened in Sheffield during the past season, which was massively disabling for the Steel Dogs as an organisation. But the first of the really big pieces of the old Steel Dogs era is on the move. Dimitri Zamostra has flown the coop and joins the Hull Seahawks for 24-25. Massive signing for Hull, this one, because with all due respect to the guys that have been backing up Jordan McLaughlin, they've not been at that game-stealing level for the most part. And the ability of being able to kind of have a 1A, 1B scenario, and also somebody to push McLaughlin, because the one thing that we know from McLaughlin is he's a really talented netminder, but in terms of who's challenging him for that whole number one spot, it's just been him basically by himself. And also, it will work out in a bunch of different ways, because McLaughlin, aside from the fact he has somebody pushing him for that number one shirt, McLaughlin's going to be able to get a bit of a rest from time to time, because they'll be able, if they have a tough back-to-back, maybe, a bit scheduling goes weird and they're on the road on a Saturday, Sunday, well, McLaughlin doesn't need to play, travel, do all that travel, play a game, travel, play another game, travel home. You can do a split between McLaughlin and Simonstra. This is a huge, big signing for Hull, and actually this is kind of symptomatic a little bit of what we've seen out of Matty Davies. We saw the year 1 Seahawks, and they were what they were, and then we saw the year 2 Seahawks where he pressed on and he got those big guys back. He got Bobby Chamberlain to come back. He got Towner and Bonner and all the old band back together in Hull as well, and then augmented it by picking up, by keeping Emerald Svek and then getting Owen Sobchak into the bargain. Brock Bartholomew, massive guy there in terms of the context of their season too. Declan Balmer, who's had a career year in terms of points, he's still only 28 years old, and now we're seeing what he kind of needs to do. It's now those little augmentations of bits and pieces that where were they. Where did they need upgrading? Well, net minding depth was a massive thing that Hull did not have, despite, because McLaughlin is one man and he can only do one man's work. So adding Zimostra into that, especially where Sheffield are very clearly changing direction. There is, as far as I'm aware, going to be news out of the Steel Dogs at the beginning of next week. We await that. To come. I know Jamie McElroy has tweeted about it. My understanding is that, yes, there will be news out of Sheffield in terms of signings at the beginning of next week, but remains to be seen. Obviously, cards subject to change, terms and conditions apply. Please keep your arms and legs inside British hockey at all times. The other bits of news, of course, from other leagues, of course, we've seen that Slough are going to be announcing a new face to the Jets this coming Friday. Of course, a few big re-signings. The Holy Trinity are back in Slough for South 1. For 24-25, Christian Moore, Sebastian Moore, and Jack Goodshire will all be in red, white, and blue for the upcoming season. So that'll be, and obviously there will definitely be a few other names that have kind of worked their way back into it. But they say there is a new face at the hangar for 24-25 to be announced on Friday evening, so that'll be a lot of fun. Elsewhere as well, we've seen the return of Rennie Marr. Now, I think we all kind of knew this was happening. It's not that big a surprise for Rennie Marr to re-sign in Swindon, but an 8th year at the Wildcats for the Scottish netminder. Obviously, did not have the best of weekends last weekend there for him, but I maintain that he has had a massive comeback here this year. 22-23 was an off year for Marr, not just in terms of his numbers, but in terms of his performance as well. I think that 23-24, in spite of the madness that Swindon had to endure this season, that certainly post coming back to Swindon in December when the rink reopened, I think Marr's been a revelation in terms, it's like night and day between last season and this for him. And I think he was a big part in getting Swindon over the hump and getting them back to Coventry. Yes, it was just the one game for the Wildcats at the dance this weekend, but they made it for the first time in a decade, and that sort of mental... so you get a taste of something and you want a little more. If Swindon can kind of maintain that, maintain that momentum going forward, then they're going to do big things next year as well, and a full season back in their building, which is going to be huge as well when you consider just how good this team was kind of on the upswing as the season went on. The other bits of news out of South 2. Where the Haringey Huskies have a brand new coach. Their coaching staff all stepping away, all stepping down. Peter Taylor is the new coach of the Haringey Huskies. Where he was certainly this was his first year kind of involved in some of the backroom sort of coaching bits and pieces for the Huskies. But General Manager Lee Mercer with a large majority of their coaching staff all stepping away, putting trust in the man that was already there to lead the Huskies into the 24-25 South 2 season. Will the Huskies, there's a storyline for you to follow as well through next season. Haringey, who came so close in so many things last year, have been the bridesmaid for quite a long time in South 2. Can the coaching of Peter Taylor and any changes that he makes to that roster at Ali Pally, can he get them over the line as well? Just checking a few other bits and pieces. As far as I'm aware, the only other bit of news that I immediately had, we can kind of talk about a little bit later. So, Coventry Stick in the chat, folks. What do we want to talk about when it comes to Coventry? What do we want to talk about? What are the big things that we need to obviously kind of mention very quickly? What things need to be spoken about? What things do you want to touch on? Now, goals or no goals, don't worry. I will mention them. Yes, Andrew, I'm going to talk about that in a minute when we get to... we'll talk about that in a bit more detail when we get to chatting about the National Div 1 final, because I think that's worth kind of talking about. Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about them, Kev, because we don't really... we can't really ignore that. Any individual moments anybody kind of wants to talk about, that'd be good. Will Ulrich be a steel dog on a two-way? I would be massively, massively surprised, Kaylee, if he's not, given his appearances for the Steelers this year. Because if you're Ulrich and you see and you've got that way into being a Sheffield Steeler now, if the conversation will likely have been had with Aaron Fox about what he wants to do with his future. And actually the best way and the easiest way is to be Sheffield based, play with the Steel Dogs, do bits and pieces with the Steel Dogs, and then be on call for the big club. That's going to be a big attraction for a lot of young guys, because if the Steelers are genuinely committed to pulling through the youngsters, the one place they're going to want those youngsters isn't in Hull, with all due respect to Matty Davies and Hull or anybody else in Yorkshire. They're going to want those guys in Sheffield at the Steel Dogs now that they own the Steel Dogs. So Ulrich, if he is not a Sheffield Steel Dog by the end of the summer, I'd be massively, massively surprised if I'm 100% honest there. A few bits and pieces coming in there in the chat. Obviously, like I said, we'll talk about Billingham and Robinson in a bit. The winning goal 100% went in against Telford. MK fans being the loudest, most hated fans across the weekend. Ref missed Austin Mitchell King goal going in before that. North versus South game on Sunday. Very good to watch. Happy for Ryan Watt, as was I. Massively happy for the folk at Streatham, just because that's been worked on for a long time. Bless them, that one. Either way, I mean, just to kind of give some kind of context for people who weren't aware, yes, that was me on commentary. I did say it on the show a couple of weeks ago, but that was me on colour commentary alongside George Perritt from the guys from Drop the Puck, who do a lot of work on bits and pieces for One North. They regularly do the streams for Witness Wild in One North. And those guys were sort of doing all the tech, and then it was me and George on the microphones for the weekend. We did have a brief discussion about whether I'd end up doing play-by-play, maybe on one of the games on the Sunday, on the North versus South game, to let George rest his voice. And in the end, we just kind of decided that we'd rolled pretty well together in the combination we'd had on the Saturday, so we just repeated on the Sunday, and I think it worked quite well. George is really good to work with. Actually, what he's very, very good at is just making sure he's prepared. Now, he does not watch as much National Division as I do, which I have to be honest is probably why I was asked to do it. In terms of someone who keeps really heavy tabs on what's going on in the National, but and also just having a good level, I think, of general kind of NIHL knowledge. So having somebody like me there was probably helpful in that sense. But I've done, the ability to kind of do both is now kind of in my toolbox. So I just turned up kind of ready for whatever they wanted. I prep in my way, he preps in his way, and George is just very, 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 very focused in at that kind of point. But he also knew what he didn't know. So the ability to be able to just kind of sit down and prep before those games was really good. And I hope if people watched it that they enjoyed it. Hopefully when the highlights come out, I won't completely dislike the sound of my own voice, but I think it went really well. I think actually what we ended up doing was, yes, there was obviously that discussion about the price point for all the streams, but I said that I did say that was something that wasn't kind of within anybody's control. It wasn't even within Drop the Puck's control, to be frank. And what I said we were going to do was we were all going to turn up and we were going to put a shift in, and I think that's what you got out of us. A big shout out as well, and a big thank you to the guys that Dropped the Puck, to Gary, to Ben, to Pete, to Mark, to all of the folk who were kind of doing the tech bits and pieces across the weekend for Drop the Puck, for having me and George in kind of safe hands so that we could just get on and do what we were there to do. But also as well, just a really, really nice group of people Not what they didn't micromanage us, didn't feel the need to kind of say too much of bits and pieces, and it's one of those things of everyone kind of did what they needed to do at the time they needed to do it. It made for a really different commentary weekend for me because, of course, normally I'd be used to kind of just sort of walking around a bit more, talking to people a bit more, and I feel like I didn't talk to as many people as I would do in the past. But what it allowed me to do was the opportunity to kind of have that moment where I've had such a weird wonky year of what may be a few weird wonky years now if we're honest to ourselves in terms of the situation in Basingstoke, but it kind of gave me the being able to look at it from a different perspective, and be involved in the game in that way that I really enjoyed doing as well as was great. And so like I say, just a big thanks to Gary and Ben for the folk from the folk at Drop the Puck, and like I say, a big thank you to George as well, because I think we, despite the fact we don't talk very often away from anything like that, you seem to put us together and it seems to work quite well, I think, which is pretty good. And I can see that comment, Colin. Great to meet you as well. And just a big I'm glad he enjoyed it as well. So yeah, that was good. Like I say, more kind of that sort of personal, retrospective, reflective bit in Curtain Down that should be out tomorrow if I can finish it in time. It's the short version on that, and I do need to finish it. I've started it, but I haven't finished it because there's a few bits I'm struggling to get out of my head at the moment as to how quite I want to phrase it. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, but the thing that was frustrating me about it was I was saying to someone, like, actually the process of physically writing stuff is actually not the hard part for me. Physically writing now is quite a quick process. What I struggle with is kind of getting the thoughts out. Is that sort of element of ordering everything around. Physically writing, I can write about 1,000 words in 90 minutes usually, but especially on a piece like this where I'm kind of closing out the season, it can be very hard to kind of sort of drag everything out of the ears a little bit, as it were. Either way, Saturday, the 27th of April, my dad's birthday of all things. So he got a picture of from the top of the gantry of doing those bits and pieces. That was a lot of fun. And it started, I said, the two semi-finals on the Saturday, we had style meshes for the two semi-finals. It was going to lead to a styles clash on the Sunday. Leeds versus Swindon. Jimmy Archer, Stevie Whitfield and Russ Cowley. Somebody, a couple, maybe one, possibly two in that pack were about to retire. And what did we end up with? Well, the Leeds Knights did do what the Leeds Knights going to do, and they blew the Wildcats away in the grander scheme of things. 7-3 final score, a 4-0 lead in the first period for the Leeds Knights in this one. And I think if you're Swindon, you're frustrated by this, because I think the playoff round robin for Swindon was the big mental hurdle. And some people will kind of, and this isn't a spoiler, I'm not going to faff around with this. The film's been out since the 80s, right? Most of us have seen Rocky, and will have seen Rocky 2. And maybe this was the year that maybe getting to Coventry was kind of the Rocky 1 moment. It didn't matter if Swindon won or not. They just needed to get there, and then they can work out the rest from there. But I think what I think is probably worth noting from the Cats, I don't think Swindon played that badly. All in all, what I don't think they did was they didn't play badly. They did not play great. And you need to, on that big stage, play great against Leeds. You need to be locked in with your game plan. And it was very hard to kind of tell what Swindon were trying to do. Credit to the Cats, though. They go 4-0 down. And it gets back to 4-2 by the end of the first period. And I'll tell you what, that first period break came at a good time for Leeds. That was the worst thing that could have happened to Swindon. Swindon get a third before the first ends. 4-3 heading into the second period. Very, very different hockey game, all things considered, I think. Also, as well, shout out Sam Bullas, because Sam Bullas has popped up a fair bit during this playoff run for the Cats to score big, important goals when they needed them. All things considered, Leeds are, we've used the word a lot. They are relentless, and yes, we'll talk about what happened on Sunday as well. But even then, they were just ridiculous all the way through. And I'll tell you what, like I say, there's a few names people have picked out there. Noah McMullen and Bo Neely on Saturday were absolute machines. They ran the show. Leeds scored 7 goals, and I don't think we even really needed to talk about the attack, because it was the big story for me wasn't even Sam Gospel with that toe save on Russ Cowley, and if there was a moment you could pick as to where Swindon weren't going to win that game, that was probably it. But the Cats had no way to get past that ridiculous defensive display. And yes, we talk about McMullen and Neely with the forefront of that, but it's also Colvin and Dylan Hare. What a weekend as well from Dylan Hare on the balance of things as well. He did brilliantly with his defensive responsibilities. Jordan Griffin did a really good job of kind of keeping Tomasz Malazinski out of the game. But Swindon, they just couldn't. The top players did not play to their full potential. And it was one of those things of guys, like I say, they weren't bad, but they weren't good at the same time, and that's kind of what cost the Cats, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And I think, a lot of Swindon fans I talk to, and I think this is probably pretty true, were happy that they got there. They got over the line and didn't need to, weren't overly, a win would have been nice. A win would have been nice. But in the larger scheme of things, they finally made it there, and now they have something to build from. Especially after, like I've said, this year is a bit of a mulligan, I feel, kind of for Swindon, given everything that happened in the first few months. But you think about what they achieved, irrespective, right? No home from September to December, and made the semi-finals of the Cup, 3rd in the league, and their first commentary weekend in a decade. If you're Swindon, I'm probably pretty happy for the most part. A little bit disappointed that they didn't really show up too well on the day, because I do think that Swindon are one of the few teams that can get into a firefight with Leeds and win it. But obviously, as I say a lot, the champs are the champs for a reason, and it was nice and comfortable for them heading into Sunday. And then we get to the evening. Oh boy. Peterborough and Telford. Now, like I said, Leeds and Swindon was a styles match. This definitely was as well. And I have to say, I think we all thought there was a point there where Peterborough had stuffed themselves badly. Swindon didn't gas or sign anyone during the season. No, they traditionally don't, Andrew. They don't. They are really good at keeping a hold of guys. It's very, very infrequently they will release anybody. Matt Barron was on fire too. I'll throw this out there. Actually, I was much more impressed with Matt Hayward's contribution this weekend in terms of the all-round. I don't think Hayward's getting enough credit for his performance, Andrew, across this weekend, because I think he's his physicality and doing a lot of the really, really dirty work, I don't think has got the appreciation from the weekend that I think it probably should have. But Barron took his goals very, very well. Jake Witkowski's goal, jeez, what a shot that was, as well. Marr would want at least 3 of those goals back. He didn't have a good day. He's way better than that. I'm not sure what he could have done on most of their goals though, Dave. I think a large chunk of it was he just was not getting any help, which didn't help either. Story of Rene's season: 2 inconsistent, brilliant one though, but pulled twice in MK and poor performance in the semi-final. I think you're being a bit unfair to him there, Jamie, because one thing I think people don't appreciate is that if things are not going, if the team aren't playing well, Aaron Nell will frequently pull Rennie Marr out of the fire early. Telford game in the playoffs as well. Didn't need him in there. It's only going to do him more harm than good to keep him in. Rennie very rarely gets pulled because of his bad performances, and he gets pulled as a point that's being made to the team and to protect him more than anything else on that front. Either way, Telford and Peterborough, which was much more of a chess match kind of game. If Leeds and Swindon were the two, was Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje swinging haymakers in the last 10 seconds. This was much more kind of scientific. in terms of how the two teams went about it. Yeah, and it was like I say, aesthetically definitely not the most pleasing game, and was definitely felt like a notch or two slower. There was much more kind of space. There's more space being made available. Credit to kind of Leeds, especially on this, with any remote inch of space got closed down really quickly. Which, when you're quite a fast team, it's really easy to do. But in Telford and Peterborough, guys were being left open more and more. And like I say, with Peterborough 4-2 up, I thought, right, we all know how this story goes. And then Telford worked their way back into it because for whatever reason, Telford, despite the fact they still, again, lose in a semi-final, found a way to force the issue. And they forced mistakes out of people. The equalising goal, Joe Aston of all people, in on the forecheck, not expecting anything, and out of nowhere, the puck is just on his stick because Tom Norton has a brain fart in front of 2,000 people. And there's very little that Jordan Marr could have done about that, all things considered. Now, let's get down to this and let's have this discussion now, because I know a lot of people have said a lot of things. Let's talk about what happened first, and let's talk about the other bit. Let's talk about how we rectify the situation afterwards. The commentary position at the end of the media gantry. So George and I are at the far right end as we were looking at it, looking at the ice. We are the end closest to the open end of the sky dome, where the skybox is. We are looking with our eyes. So we have a monitor in front of us, but George and I are pretty much only using that for replays. And I'm not going to speak for George, I will speak for myself, but I'm just telling you what we see. So we see, the goal that wasn't from Austin Mitchell-King, I thought, from my vantage point, that Brad Day had saved it between his pads, because I'm looking from a distance, and we didn't get a replay of that particular shot. We just didn't get one, and that is what it is. And could see, I thought it had been saved. We're then further on, obviously, into overtime, and Callum Douglas is doing what he does, and I mentioned about 2 or 3 times, at least once during the preamble in the game, about the fact that that 2019 wonder goal that he scored against the Hull Pirates in the grand final, and I see him up the wing, and I think to myself, I know exactly what he's doing here. And I kind of just immediately turn my attention towards the goal, because I'm pretty certain that he's going to make it to the net. It all happens very quickly, of course, and the shot comes in. Everybody says the referee waved off the goal and then pointed for it. Why has the referee done that? Because it's hit the post to start with, is hit Brad Day's left post, the right-hand post, as Douglas is looking at it. And so he washes that out because he needs to say there has been no goal there. So he says no, to make it clear. The puck then obviously goes across, and Mr. Ferguson, who's the official closest to it, makes a point of saying that he thinks he sees the puck over the line, calls the goal, game is done. Now, in the moment, whether you agree with the official's assessment of this or not, the official has gotten one thing really, really right, and that is he has signalled hard and clearly that it is a goal, where it's a goal, and that it is a goal, and that is his decision on the ice. Irrespective if they go away and chat about it, we were left with no doubt that the official thinks the puck has crossed the line. Because the one thing you wouldn't want in that situation, in a big game, is any doubt as to what the referee's actually called. Didn't just blow his whistle once, pointed off and walked away. He has made a really big point, big clear gesture. It's there, it's there, it's there. And actually, in the moment, that's really important to do. Now, the footage I have seen, because with my own eyes, I obviously couldn't make an assessment as to whether it was in from that distance. I'm the better part of 150 metres away, at a slanted angle, looking down like that, trying to gather whether it's in. I'm reliant on the people closest to the action, namely the officials and the players, to make a point of whether they think it's gone in. The footage I've seen in the replay, I am not 100% sure. Now, the issue being that in the moment, the referee has signalled goal. We would need comprehensive evidence to overturn the call on the ice. I've not seen enough evidence one way or the other to tell me that that puck wasn't across the line. So in the moment, we have to give a good goal because the official has signalled a goal, and on review, from what I've seen, I cannot disprove that puck over the line from what I've been given. So I have to say it's a goal on that basis because that's how the rule works, right? And obviously, this has landed about as well in as well in Telford as a salad at a carnival's party. The reaction from Tommy Watkins is very out of character for Tom Watkins. Now, I sincerely believe he's going to end up having to retract that statement he's put out because he has deliberately pointed a finger at the official. He's over the line in terms of the social media policy that does exist within the rules of competition here. I venture there is going to be a retraction, or he's going to get quite a stern talking to in the off-season from the NIHL management if and when anything happens along that front. I don't blame Telford for being frustrated by it at all because it's very, very clearly a borderline call, and there is a real issue there with what do you do in terms of what do you do in that kind of moment. Now, obviously, how do we rectify the situation going forward? Because we can't change anything now. Mr. Ferguson points, it is a goal, and the game is done. Irrespective of every name under the sun you want to call Mr. Ferguson, if you're a Telford fan, I get it. I 100% get it because we should have had a better way of determining what was happening with that. What do we do to make it better? Because the obvious thing, and the thing that's been said a lot, and it's been said on Macca's Talk Hockey, and it's been said on Twitter, lots by loads of other people, is having video replay in the final. Or at least having it at commentary weekend, or even better, we have it for every team in the league. Well, the cost of having it for every team in the league is going to be too high for certain teams in this league. To have the level that elite league teams have is going to be problematic. So there has to be a system that they agree, and if they're going to do it, they need to do it as a collective, and they need to kind of all chip in to help each other out here if they want that technology installed. However, what people think about that technology and how well it works, the technology that you got to do these things is not that much different from what was used to record the stream. It's GoPros in places, it's camera angles in different places. This is not what the NHL have. This isn't even what the Ice League have in Austria, and the Ice League are one of the few leagues. There is, like in Germany, there is no sort of Toronto bunker. There is in Austria, weirdly, so what it would be for a lot of teams is having GoPros in appropriate places for the most part, because that's the cheapest way to do it, and then making sure that feed, the ability to look at those different feeds, is in the timekeeper's bench so that the referees can pick up iPad, tablet, whatever you want to do, and that they can look back at it, or it's a laptop somewhere that they can check those things out. So technology is not the immediate, is a thing that exists. The technology is available. Should it have been used last weekend without every team agreeing to do it? No, because I think you have to make sure everybody is on board with it. It wasn't in the ROC, wasn't in the rules of competition to do it. Should they have done it? Probably, but then you'd also need somebody to run it, and it's all well and good we've got all these cameras, you'll make it work, but you've got to make it work in the moment, in real time, if the referee asks to look at something. And ultimately, for all the different video angles, they still may not come to a conclusion that people actually are happy with, because you would need, the way you would have found out whether that was a goal or not is an NHL camera angle. It's a camera above the goal, looking down, straight down. Because if you have if you have a camera on the goal line like that, you could easily have a puck be over the line and it be obscured, potentially a part of the angle be obscured by a goalpost. Behind doesn't really tell you very, very well unless you look in certain ways. If you have it slightly in front, you get distorted angle. The only way really to have that is to have either a camera in the goalpost, which no team in Britain is going to be able to afford, or you're having a puck in the ceiling looking down. And that's going to be the tough part of that. 2 player departures from the Bees. We'll have a quick look at that momentarily. Let's get those up. Now that is interesting from the Bees. Zane McKenzie and Ryan Webb not returning for 24-25. That's a shame about Ryan Webb. McKenzie, I'm not massively surprised because, of course, he will likely want to push on towards the Panthers and stay there. I am interested as to where Ryan Webb goes on that one. I do find that interesting. Is Ryan Webb a candidate for somewhere like Streatham or Slough? I wonder on that one. It'd be a good veteran presence for Slough, actually, potentially. Either way, should we have video reviews in the finals weekend? Yes, because there is the ability to do it, but the league need to make sure that it is done properly, and we get the people who do it for the Blaze to do it for the finals, because it'd be their kit in their rink. Or you drop the puck a bunch of money and train them how to do it, is the other way of doing it. Because ultimately, what we've had more gubbins about this. Another big decision where people are laying into the refs for something actually in the moment that they have to make a call, and they have to make a split-second call, and it's left one set of fans massively, massively unhappy, and people confused, generally. For me, particularly if the National Division is going to step out from the National Ice Hockey League structure and be an independent entity of itself, the thing it should do is it should implement its own video review system. Talent borrows, genius steals. The Elite League have found a half-decent way to make it work. Use what they use. Do it the same way and figure it and do it that way. Will it be perfect? No. Because I think like I say, you're asking people, unless you're giving NHL quality kit, you're not going to get NHL quality decisions. So if you're doing it with a bunch of GoPros in places and fuzzy pictures on laptop screens, you're not going to get everything you want that way. And also what you need to be able to have is angles that are solely for that, not just for the not just for the TV feed as well. And maybe I can ask that question. Maybe I'll try and find out from the Guildford folk how they do theirs, because obviously they need to have it for Elite League stuff. So there's definitely a way to do that. Because one of the Guildford games I commentated on had a video review done in it. So I wasn't surprised the refs from Telford game had been picked for the final. For you, well, they changed up the refs because Jimmy Irons refed the Telford game and refed the final. In that sense, so they chopped and changed. They changed the combos around. Either way, what that left us with 2 finals on Sunday, and that left us with Leeds and Peterborough. And obviously that meant that you had the Jimmy Archer versus Will Weldon retirement battle royal. But we do need to talk first, of course, about Streatham and Billingham. And yes, Andrew Williamson has mentioned it in the chat that post the game, there of course we've had the retirement from coaching of Rob Wilkinson. We send him our best. He's been a very long-standing servant of hockey in the North East, so the fact he's stepping away from things, fair play to him on that front. Now, Billingham, of course, are the one team this weekend that I had not seen with my own 2 eyes. I've watched a good chunk of video because, hey, drop the puck, do a North One highlight show, which is really helpful. I spoke to a few people who played against them in the build-up, just to try and get an idea. And I also spoke to Craig Simpson, one of the GB Media guys, is based out of Billingham, so he knows them quite well. And I speak every so often to Carol Hunter, who's involved in the media team at Billingham too. So I was getting an idea. And of course, I was surrounded by a bunch of Northerners who've seen Billingham multiple times over the last couple of years and did all the streaming for the North One playoff, so had seen them quite a bit. Whereas none of them, the lot I was working with, had seen Streatham twice before, both times in Cov. So that was my helpful bit there. And I know a few guys on that Streatham roster. I won't lie, it's that game that I'm always massively excited about, and I still maintain this. This is what makes the National Divisions weekend better than the Elite League weekend, because you get 4 games of hockey, 4 competitive games of hockey that mean something for a better price. It is better value for money, and there is there is no argument for me on this. A third, fourth place playoff game. Oh, people. The streams were up. Well, it also wasn't shown on telly, so it was the only way to do it. But it's a game that means nothing. You're paying that money literally for the deadest of dead rubbers that nobody wants to be involved with. Whereas the Sunday game at Coventry is massive. And I've watched Elite League games that were better than that game on Sunday, and I've watched Elite League games that were worse. So this notion that the Elite League has to figure out a way to solve its Sunday problem, in my opinion. But Streatham kind of edged themselves out into a decent lead, of course, not helped by Ryan Watt scoring the very first shot of the game. George and I on the broadcast had talked a fair bit about Tom Brown and his numbers, because if you look at the netminding numbers for North One, Tom Brown is miles away from everybody else, and he gets caught absolutely cold off the first shot of the game that Ryan Watt just lasers over his shoulder. And Billingham were guys down. I think there were 5 guys down. Grugels, their import defenseman, suspended. Ian Brown, their import forward, who is the cousin of Tom Brown but is Canadian, is my understanding. He'd been out since the cup final against their cup final, shellacking against Blackburn with a quite a bad injury. I can't remember if it's a broken wrist or a broken rib, something like that. It's probably a broken wrist if you're a hockey player. That probably would last longer. But so it was one import versus one import in that kind of sense, which is because Streatham have been a one import team all season. There was some talk, of course, about would Michael Farm play. He chose not to play off the basis of having wanting to let the team that had done the business the year before and not gotten over the line have the chance to do it. So there was him and Adam Carr just stood around drinking for the entire weekend, which was fun. But yeah, Streatham go 1 goal up, and then they go 2 goals up through Skokan, who is a player who I think, having spoken to Ben Painter a fair bit, they all kind of wish he would shoot more, because that's what happens when he shoots. And then they gave the goal to JJ Pitchley. I'm not convinced within a month of Sundays that touched JJ Pitchley. I think Skokan scored that. And then it was, and then at 3-0, there was a bit of a weight. It felt like there was a weight lifted off of all the Streatham fans that were hanging around down in that far corner to my right as I was looking at it. And then James Moss scores. And I tell you what, that Billingham side, for a team that was, that Billingham side very, very clearly has a lot of quality. And pulling it back to, getting themselves into a position where they looked like they were scratching their heads at 2-0 down at the end of the first period, and then to get themselves into a position by the end of the third period at 4-3. The first period break came as a godsend for Billingham, but that second period break came as a godsend for Streatham, because they were in a mess at the end of that second period, where Moss scored his second, and then for whatever reason, Stretham's defence just goes walking off into Crosby's bar, pretty much. I've never seen a more ridiculous-looking goal than Chris Sykes's, where Danny Milton is trying to hunch himself over the top of the puck to just narrow down the angle by any means possible, for only then for him to eventually have to sprawl out and Sykes walk the puck around him and in, because Chris Sykes has 80-something points this year. And then the third period worked out for Streatham. They kind of set themselves back and they refocused. Billingham will rue the fact that their power play was not anywhere near good enough. the amount of penalties Streatham gave up. And yes, that's a byproduct of Streatham's game. They are a physical team. You give away penalties. But the fact that they had so much time, including a 5-minute power play at the end of the game, followed by another 2-minute power play after that, and they just weren't getting shots of quality on. And it was the strategy, the long-term strategy of Ben Payne to come to fruition. He gave up offensive firepower and beating MK like 30, 14, 15, 16-0 to win to have less scoring but be defensively responsible, because when it all came down to it in that final 20 minutes, after they'd been shaken, they shut Billingham down. And I think that's the thing. Billingham fans will say, we were guys short. We only had one import. Streatham only had one import. They were down Josh Newman. They were down Danny Ingoldsby. Ingoldsby was a 50-something point scorer the year before. Should Pitchley have gone for that check in the corner? No. It was a 2-minuter the entire way through. If you chuck out Pitchley for that check in the corner, you have to chuck out Shuggy Galloway for his hit. I'd say on that one, Andrew. I think if that's the line of where we're calling stuff, then Galloway would have been thrown out as well. Josh Martin, it's a 5-minute. Primary point of contact is the head. You can see what he's tried to do, which is tried to just get body position and bounce the smaller man off of him. And instead, what he's done is he's elbowed the kid in the head. It's a bad hit. There's no argument about it at all. And you can see he was gutted by it. And when he came back onto the ice at the end of the game, the first thing all of his teammates had done just gone, it's all right, it's okay. It's very clearly wasn't a malicious thing. He's tried to do one thing and done another. Jack Emerson was a big miss. Yes, a few people said to me that they felt that he was a miss as well. But you only beat what's in front of you on that front. And also, I think we saw as well that how hyper focused Streatham have been, and I've talked about it a lot on this show, how lasered in Streatham have been to get back to this point. Whereas for Billingham, it's felt a bit more like the North is kind of resetting itself after Solway's departure. And maybe we will see something different next year. From what I understand from the stream as well, a few people were not super happy with Bentley on the stream saying would it have been a different game? Would Blackburn have done better than Billingham in the circumstance? And it's not that they would have done. He was asking the question of that they would, because I'm aware that a few Billingham people were supposedly quite upset. And I think they've misinterpreted slightly what Ben's asked in that question, because he's asked the point. He's creating a point of discussion for me and George to answer as the people commentating on the game. And Blackburn, I think it would have been a very, very interesting game, if only because I'm pretty certain Blackburn versus Streatham ends up in a fight. There's at least one fight, maybe even two, in that one. It would have been fascinating to see how well that Streatham defence would have coped with Adam Barnes, for example. But that Streatham side has just dealt with Rylands has dealt with Grithands. It's dealt with Sykes. It's dealt with Elder. So, is Adam Barnes that far and away that much better than those guys? I'm not sure he is, but the Billingham staff were furious. I did have a chat to at least one of them about it and just said, I'm not quite sure I'm not sure that's quite the point that they were making. But I do get that. I get why people would be upset by it if they I'm not sure that's what Ben said. Ben's asked a question to generate a discussion rather than genuinely thinking that Blackburn would have done more there. But that's my opinion from my side of it. And I come with the inherent bias, of course, of having worked with them the entire weekend, so you don't have to agree with my opinion either on that front. JJ Pitchley is going to be insufferable for many, many weeks because he scored the game-winning penalty shot in a national final, so that's going to be fun the next time I talk to him. But Billingham look really good. What I was impressed with was those younger Buccaneers guys who stepped up. I think they didn't look out of place. Dowdle, I thought, looked really, really good. He looks like a really, really good prospect going forward. Moss, I thought, was really, really good as well. He took his goals very well. I think Brown will want a couple of those goals back. Myself, Grittens and Sykes didn't have the best games. No, and but I think as well they were very, very well controlled by Stretham's D in that case as well. I thought Tomaszko Kam had one of the best games I've seen him play. He was brilliant in the cup final against Slough. He was brilliant in this game as well, actually. He's really stepped up in those big moments this year. I thought Jordan Gregory as well, who is not the most mobile of defensemen. I think he did a really good shutdown job in there as well. I think as well, though, that credit to Billingham's D, because they stifled a lot of the really good free-flowing movement from Streatham. So Ziggy Beasley didn't get the opportunity to do lots and lots in this game. What I thought Billingham did struggle with was that matchup of third lines, because I think they didn't quite know what to do with that combination of Ben Ely Newman, Brandon Miles and Jared Lane. I think that was one of the... it was really good to see Brandon Miles, who's had a bit of an interesting year, of course, because people just aren't fighting him. To see him skating at full pelt and just really just being relied on to play, and then getting stuck in when he needed to. Of course, he took at least one penalty for just walloping some poor person who'd taken out JJ Pitchley, but it was a really good matchup. It was a really good game. I think it was a really great advert for Div 1 hockey as well, where people sort of say, oh, hockey's not entertaining at that level. And I say to them again, I don't know what to tell you. You must be walking around with your eyes shut. And like I say, folk in the north, check out the stuff in the south, because it's really, really good. And folk in the south, check out stuff in the north. There's a lot of good stuff happening there. And if Billingham is Billingham's been a bit of a project piece for a couple of years now, and they're really starting to come into their own. But, there is a lot of potential there for Billingham to do a lot more. Streatham, really, yes, they could get all the trophies, but there's less room to grow, I think, for Streatham in the immediacy. Whereas I think Billingham, there is more to come. There is much more to come from the Stars, and I think they are going to, hopefully, between them and Blackburn and Solihull, we're going to have some really good hockey next year in terms of deciding where the North 1 title ends up next year. And then what did that leave us with? That left us with the main event, the NIHL National Division playoff final of the Leeds Knights, the defending league champions, the defending playoff champions against the Peterborough Phantoms. And I said to a few people in the Game of War, and I said it in the build-up as well, that the way that Peterborough win this game is by literally slather hockey and turn it up to 11. And I know that didn't go down well with some people when I spoke to them, and that's okay, because they have their opinions on Peterborough hockey and I have my opinions on it too. And the aesthetics are what they are. But people have said to me this year as well that Peterborough have been a bit they've not quite hung their way back as much. They've been a bit better at kind of, done a bit more kind of coming forward. Where if this season has been diet slather, we got the full fat version in the playoff final, because the Peterborough Phantoms are the playoff champions, and they played the slather hockey games of slather hockey games, and they snuffed out the Knights as a result. They couldn't do it all, but there's an acceptance with that kind of game. If you're going to accept pressure on you, that occasionally you will give up goals. But what Peterborough did was one of the best all-team performances I've seen in quite some time. And like I said, I don't enjoy it. I'm not going to tell you that it's good hockey, because I don't find it that enjoyable. Was it effective? You bet your ass it is. It was really effective, because what they managed to do was pull Leeds away from what Leeds do best. They made Leeds walking, just like they did to Telford for the last stretch of the semi-final. If you walk into the land of the Phantoms and try to play the Phantoms game, you will lose, because there is only one team that is good at playing slather hockey, and that is Peterborough. There is Leeds deserve a lot of credit, because actually what they managed to do was they managed to find those little gaps in the armour and work their way through and make it happen. Peterborough knew when they needed to push and knew when they needed to drop back. There was a point, I can't remember when it was, I think it was in the third period, where there was 4 men stood on the red line, and the lone forechecker was Alish Padalek, just going in circles. He's not even touching the hash marks, just miles away on that front. And it was the clash of styles, and it was whose style is going to kind of work this out. And what we ended up with, of course, was yes, it's a penalty shot win, and that in itself is a bit of a different kettle of fish. Some people don't like the penalty shots deciding playoffs. But Peterborough, I said at the end of the first period when they were a goal down, I said Peterborough are within a puncher's chance. What do they need to do? They need to stay close to Leeds. And they got themselves into a point where all they needed was a punch. All they needed was one shot to do it. If they got themselves 3-0 down, Peterborough are not winning that game. They kept themselves close, they kept themselves tight, and they found ways to do it. And also, didn't help that Sam Gospel let in 3 goals in the same spot 3 times. The first 3 goals from Hunt, from Sladkowski and Björkley Nordstrom all went same place, high blocker. That didn't help. And it was interesting as well. I said this to a couple of people as well, but I was at Peterborough's first game of the playoffs against the Bees in Slough. And one of the things that Peterborough are really good at that game is that frustrating kind of way that they suffocate teams where the top end guys will then just think, right, okay, they're going to push everybody wide. So I've got, if I hit them at speed, they won't be able to handle this. And you have guys going on these long mazy skates and they end up going up against 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys. And it doesn't really go anywhere. And there was a point in the third period where Brown starts skating into traffic by himself. Howard starts skating into traffic by himself. Barron starts skating into traffic by himself. And I just this is all starting to look really, really familiar. And it was that, like I said, if the toe save from Gospel was that moment where I knew in the semi-final, it was at that point I knew that if it went to overtime, I was a bit, it was obviously we're going to be a bit more of a toss-up. I was like, if it's being won in 60 minutes, it is going to be Peterborough because they are making Leeds do all the wrong things. Overtime, of course, was a bit of a kicker. Billy Thorpe is probably going to be seeing that one in his nightmares for a while. Because the game was literally on his stick in the dying moments of overtime. If he'd scored that, I can only imagine the celebration that would have happened. But then, of course, get to the shootout. Now, my understanding is that the person who had a medical incident in the Knights fan block during the shootout, that was a very odd moment to have to kind of deal with from a broadcast perspective because we obviously don't know what's happening. People running the clock who were next to us had a radio that went down to the scorekeeper's bench, and so we were hearing little snippets. But obviously, George and I got whopping great headphones on, and we're just trying to figure out what to do. So we just kept quiet, let George relay the information, and when when it looked like they were slowly being helped out, had a little bit of a chat about a couple of things just to let that moment happen, let the time pass, and then got back to it. And yeah, that was a big spanner in the works. But like I said, my understanding is that person is recovering at home and that they are doing much better. We send all of our good vibes that person's way, whoever they are. We hope you are well. We look forward to seeing you back soon. Third period in particular was perfect style. Refs had to give Mitchell King penalty in OT. They did. Yeah, it was pretty clear cut. And then in the shootout, of course, Brad Bowring, where has he been hiding that shootout move? If you go listen on the Twitter, there's a link to my interview that I did with with Will Weldon about this, where he says, we know that he's had this in his locker. It's all well and good if that's what he does during training when you're playing Juice Boy there, Will, but not something that a lot of us have ever seen. He had the league's best netminder spinning around like a top in that one, and then of course Luke Feds. As Will Weldon said, Mr. Peterborough does the deal, nerves of steel, home time for all, and it was a hell of a penalty shot to win it as well. And congratulations to Peterborough on doing it. Like I say, we can argue about the aesthetics till the cows come home, but its effectiveness cannot be denied. Peterborough with the 9th best power play and the 9th best penalty kill and finishing 5th on the last day of the season are the play of champions, because that's what hockey does. So there we go. And it was a strange one, that one. A fun weekend though, and a fun weekend. There was a point afterwards as well where Andrew Day and I went down to went down to ringside, and I was on the ice at the end, and lots of Peterborough fans got onto the ice, which was great to kind of see as well. And I like that as a tradition to kind of let folk on. I had a chat to a few people, managed to touch the trophy very briefly, and I chatted to Will Weldon, I chatted to Tom Norton, and I was chatting to a few people. I did chat to Kev, who's in the chat as well, down on the ice, and it was this very kind of surreal moment of kind of where this is all kind of taken us, and that there are some things that, irrespective of who wins, are always just fun to watch. The big question I have is for Joe Gretton, because everybody was passing the cup around, and there's Joe Gretton just walking around holding the lid. Like, did you just want to keep that for yourself, or like what was the plan there, mate? I'm not quite sure on that one. My son was in his helmet on the ice. Yeah, it seemed to be a great moment, and I quickly took that video of myself sort of stood on the ice, and I felt it was just kind of a nice way to kind of round out the weekend and say, hey, join us on Wednesday night. That felt like a really good thing too. But that's the first time I've ever done that, and it was a really, really nice way of, like I say, it was fun for me, and I'll share this just before the interview. Will Weldon comes over and gives me a hug, which I think is probably like the most sort of like accepting thing ever. Like on his last day, like someone who has like over the years, him and I have given each other a fair bit of verbals, and it's all been in jest for the most part. But I've obviously said a lot of things about my feelings about how the Phantoms play. But the fact that, especially post me interviewing him, post me interviewing him, we've kind of come to this sort of understanding about the fact that adults just don't always agree, and that's absolutely fine. So in that moment, of course, with all his family and everybody else around, and everybody doing all these things and all this celebrating, for him to just stop and give me a quick hug and then do my interview was actually quite quite moving in some ways, because I think that's maybe that point where I've said it quite a bit that I don't quite know what my position is in British hockey, but I think people have realised they're all stuck with me now, potentially. It was also great as well that Tom Norton came over in the middle of the interview, because it was just nice to make Will Weldon stand there and make people say nice things about him in front of him, because that's always just quite funny on that front. But it was great, and at 7:15 on Sunday evening I was stood on the ice at the Sky Dome, and at 9:30 I was through my front door, because God bless the roads on a Sunday, eh? But that is it. The National Division Division 1 shuts its door, and the last trophy goes to the High Road, finally, for Ben Painter, who obviously there'd been a lot of talk. Chris Beale had put that article into the universe and put the thought in there, borrowing from the WWE, talking about Streatham finishing the story. And the quote from Ben Painter was, "Whoever said that, not a bit of it, we're not done yet." The National Division shuts its door for 23-24. The Leeds Knights retain the league title. The Cup, something finally goes the way of Milton Keynes, and the Peterborough Phantoms spook the National and take the playoff title right at the death in sudden death penalty shots. And we get to wait a few more months, and everybody gets to try all over again. Brilliant, isn't it? I will say this as well. MK fans do not live in the heads of anybody. I think probably I would say what I think most people got frustrated by was they were making a moment that wasn't about them, trying to make it all about them. And I think that is quite frustrating for some people. Get on board with kind of what's happening there. Right. If MK have been playing, knock yourselves out. Every MK chant under the sun from the start of Saturday to the end of Sunday. But MK weren't there, and I think that probably is why people got a bit frustrated by it, if I'm 100% honest. By all means, when they play Hi-Ho, like Hi-Ho MK Lightning, that's kind of MK's song. Like, I think we all get that. But I think I think certainly that, having spoken to people, I think kind of their thing was, like, it's stop making a thing that's not about you levels worth of stuff. For me in the commentary box, I was laughing to myself because it was really funny. Because obviously, of course, it all got picked up on the audio. So it was that was quite funny on that front, which was a lot of fun. But there we go. Should be kind Coventry was great. 7:15. I was in an Indian restaurant enjoying a lovely curry. Fair play actually. To my credit, to its credit, I got a really good kebab from a place called Torino Pizza on Saturday evening in Cov. Because after Saturday I was quite tired and I didn't really want to go traipsing. I was chatting to my Swindon friends. And they were just like, we're just going to go sit in the lounge of the hotel. So I just went and sat out with them for a while. So shout out to Ben Callahan, the press officer, Meg, his other half, Tom Graham, Kieran and Nat, Gingrel, Don Russell, Lee Kent Pence and all that lot. And we just went, and I just like, I got a kebab inside a naan bread. Like, it was alarmingly good. Really, really nice, actually. They announced NHL All-Stars last year at Coventry. Did I miss it? It wasn't in the programme. No, you haven't missed it, Karen. You haven't missed any of them. I don't think they've not announced them. I'm not quite sure why. It's almost like they forgot, which is a bit special of them, but hey-ho. But yes, hopefully those come out. Like I say, if they don't come out, like I say, I'm going to do my own arbitrary nonsense bits and pieces before too long, so we can all revel in those and tell me how ridiculous I am, which will be so we can have some fun with that if nothing else. Just quickly checking as well that we got any other news that's happened. We made the atmosphere. There would have been no atmosphere. NK fans wasn't there. That's a little bit on the nose there, Jamie. I'm not sure I can agree with that. MK fans at Coventry deserve a lot of credit because they travel well and they do make a lot of noise. To say there'd be no atmosphere without them, I think is a little bit unfair. If I'm 100% honest on that front. You do, however, make a very, very good point. Just after that, though, the competitiveness of the league, the not one team dominated the National League. And I think people will argue about the quality and how close to the Elite League it is or how far away it is and that sort of thing. I personally don't believe there is a gap. I still do not believe that gap is as big as people seem to think it is, even with there being 3 imports. All things considered, but certainly in terms of the quality of British player, the national division has not gotten enough credit for just how competitive it is night to night. Yeah, teams win the league and other teams don't. It's the nature of sport. But there was obviously a bit of a concern with Bristol the more the season went on. The hope is Bristol will be better next year, and you end up with with bits and pieces, with a decent thing of with a decent league where you get the trophies split around people, where you get upset results, where you get, where you get Romford having a really wonky season, then tailing up at the end and those kind of things, and able to beat, where they beat, watching them beat Swindon in Swindon was a superb performance. It's in the discussion for the best game I've seen this year. I'm not 100% sure it will win that, just because on reflection I keep returning back to Stretton versus Slough, but there's certainly a lot of it. The closest of the games is what attracted me to going to Leeds, and that's great. Like, Leeds are, and if nothing else, I think Leeds put on a superbly attractive brand of hockey, which I think is something that I think people can kind of get behind. You get a little bit of mix of everything, I think, at Leeds as well, and you get the fact they also win a lot, which is also quite nice. But yes, Ryan Webb and Zane McKenzie. I'm interested where Zane McKenzie ends up. I'd hope he ends up at the Panthers. All things considered. Ryan Webb is an interesting one. Although obviously we talked about the fact that Slough are making an announcement tomorrow, and if I'm Ryan Webb and I don't fancy the travel, but I want to be involved, Slough would be a really good way of doing that, because you get to be that elder statesman kind of player. I don't know how old is Ryan Webb actually. Let's have a quick check of this just while we're talking about it. Ryan Webb elite prospects. How old is Ryan Webb? Because I don't think he's that old. He might be 29, 30. So he's 30. Ryan Webb is 30. If Ryan Webb joined if Ryan Webb joined Slough today, he would be their oldest player, if I'm right, or at least close to it. I'm pretty certain Timo Lindgren is the same age. Just looking at that, of course, former Streatham as well. So there's obviously he might want to go and do that, but we never. I don't think he'd go. I'm not sure he's quite what Streatham need 100%. Big changes coming in Sheffield. I think Sheffield's going to be one of the biggest talking points in the league this off-season. I wouldn't disagree, Mitchell. My understanding, like I say, there's meant to be some signings coming out at the beginning of next week. I think as well, where I'm pretty certain I think there'll be a coaching change. I don't think they continue down the track they went down last season. And they get to do stuff now. They should have either done last year or now, not mid-season, which is laying on the table what the plan is for the Steel Dogs as a feeder club for the Steelers. Like, what is the plan? Like I said earlier in the show, I'm pretty certain that Finlay Ulrich is going to be a Sheffield Steel Dog by the end of the summer. So let's see how that one rolls out. Zane McKenzie not good enough for the Panthers, unfortunately. He needs to be at National League level, but where he fits is the best question. Well, he's not good enough to start full-time in the Elite League right now, but if the Panthers actually engage in his development, then he's got the ability to do stuff at depth for them. Martin Grubb was staying in my hotel. I wonder who he was watching. Knowing Spud, probably a little bit of everybody, all things considered. I know he was flirting around. I didn't see him, unfortunately, so sorry about that. But him and John Strange were definitely down, showing their faces, pressing the flesh a little bit. Danny Stewart to Panthers. Yes, that is a lot of people in the Elite League who watch the Elite League more than I do think it's a really good move. I'm interested to see what he can do with the budget, because obviously the one thing Coventry have not had is going to the Panthers means that you do have quite an amount of resource, more than you get at Coventry. I have a massive amount of respect for Danny Stewart, and I'm interested. I just don't quite understand, and this might be just be my ignorance of the Elite League. I want to know what they're wanting him to do, because I think the thing I can't get my head around is what is the ambition for the Panthers following this season? What looks like a good year for the Panthers now after everything that's happened in 23-24? Get back in the playoffs, obviously, is pretty much the obvious one. Are the Panthers expected to be a league title winning side next year with Danny Stewart as coach? I think that's the thing I'm struggling to kind of place what's the ambition? Because if you're the Dundee Stars, for example, and I'm sorry Dundee, the expectation if you're the Dundee Stars is not that you're going to win the Elite League, right? But that's what I'm just trying to figure out here now is what is the expectation? What is the expectation? Where does this land? Coventry gives them the opportunity to kind of hit the reset button. Danny's obviously been there for a very, very long time, and following everything that happened with Dale Keane, God rest his soul, it's the opportunity for somebody to take a mid-budget team and see what they can do with the Blaze and give them a bit of a revitalisation, because crowds are down in Cov, interest is down in Cov, and you think of that. This team that kind of, certainly when I started watching British hockey in sort of the late 2000s, Coventry were almost untouchable, all things considered. Danny deserves his chance. I mean, yeah, he certainly does. Ben O'Connor to Dundee, 2 years for him that we talked about. That is an interesting one, but I venture money in Guildford will be chucked at Lewis Hook and Peter Cronella. We will see what happens there. I'd be in shock if we kept the same coaches. It just wasn't good enough at this level. A lot of poor management throughout the whole season. Would love to see Greg Wood back at the helm. I'd be hugely surprised if Woody comes back now, to be honest. Kevin Noble to place as head coach. That would be tough given to interview at the moment, given he is currently in Australia coaching the Newcastle North Stars. but the had heard commentary dropping down to the NIHL. Yep, that's a rumour that's done the rounds about every couple of the last couple of years, Andrew. My understanding is no. But no, the conversation about the Blaze dropping down happens. I am not certainly the people I speak to connected to Coventry do not feel the club would survive because fans are so used to an elite league product. My response to that would be if the Blaze went through massive financial bits and pieces, then it probably would be accepted if it kept the club alive. Not sure if you watched the interview from the Hull Seahawks this morning with Zamostra. I haven't actually, Mitchell. I'm obviously aware of it. Not had the opportunity to watch it. It's on my list of things to do. How you watch the World Championships on YouTube this week? Certainly, my no is the thing, Andrew. I watched a chunk of Australia. I watched a chunk of Australian bits and pieces from Worlds in Serbia. The last couple of days I've kind of focused on Coventry because I obviously kind of had a job to do, and then the last couple of days I've just kind of like been letting the stuff I kind of need to do for the site kind of rattle around in my head. Dimmer said there will be 3 new imports next season. Bissonette and Volkanovs to part ways with the Dogs. That's a shame for Vlad's. Although I will say this now, Vlad's Volkanovs to Telford. If he's not going back to Sheffield, I can see Tom Watkins finding a use for that young man. All things considered. If they don't keep Pecker and Sutton, and I'm not convinced they will. Had a chat to Dan Connors from Macadog Hockey. Love the boy about Basingstoke. All very depressing. Yeah, it's all still nothing has changed since the last time we talked about it. Once Planet Ice, once Planet Ice can get the building bought, it's all fine. But it's still just all caught up at the minute. Yeah, but great to see Dan. Good to see, and actually, I know. I'm not, I know sometimes, certainly Charlie, bless him, kind of ties himself in knots. He's very vocal with his opinions. Fair play to the Macca's Talk Hockey boys. I don't agree with everything they say. I think there's people complain they have a Swindon bias on their show is a bit silly, all things considered, because it was founded by two brothers who watch Swindon most of the time. So the fact they have a bit of a bias towards Swindon is expected and reasonable given what they talk about and where they talk about it from. At least they lean into it. They don't pretend to be neutral about how they feel about Swindon. So I think there's something to be said on that front. But I think bringing Dan in has been really good for the show because it's a different voice and a slightly different way of doing around things. And of course, the other thing you need to remember for these guys is they're new to it. If you like them now, great. Imagine how they're going to be when they are better at doing bits and pieces, are better at interviewing, better at doing stuff, and they're pretty solid now. But imagine how much better they're going to be. So if you're liking what they're doing now, hop on the bandwagon and support them now. If you don't like them now, give them time because they'll get better with time. Jack is, Jack does media bits and pieces for uni, and he's interning at, I think it's Cheltenham Town, is one of the football clubs in that neck of the woods. It's like AI at the moment. AI right now is the worst version of AI we're ever going to have. These lads have come in and have made, have done something in the space and made a bit of an impact and done things their way. If you don't like it now, think about what they can do with time to improve. And if you like them now, they're going to get better with time. That's how that works, right? So it's going to be good. Where do you think Bissonette will land or possible retirement? He could be another... again, if Pecker and Sutton don't come back, you could see both of them in Telford. Bissonette... I'd be interested. I think personally, I think he'll retire. Maybe as an outside, maybe Solway. It's a long way to go, given he lives in Sheffield now. But I don't think he does Div 1, if I'm 100% honest, unless a really good offer comes up in Div 1 for him. I think Bissonette will probably retire. The Swindon fans, but no one is perfect. Well, no, that's fair enough. I mean, there's very few voices coming out of Romford about these things. I mean, for Pete's sake, Dave, I've written for your programme all year because there's so few people to do it. But yeah, it's there's good bits and pieces out there as well. Nicky keeps rolling along with 4,000 and counting. And possibly getting Nicky to be quiet at the best of times is a tough ask, but he's obviously still rolling along. Dragon's Den is there doing bits in Widnes. We've got bits and pieces and people having a go at it. Zero Pucks Given, of course. Ben has done superb stuff this year with South One. So there's lots of, there's stuff there. And all I ever say to people is that, the only reason I've stuck around so long, I think, is perseverance and just a dedication to the fact that I just enjoy what I do. Like, I enjoy writing. Writing is one of the things that keeps me sane. So writing is good, and I have the opportunity to kind of write and do things in different ways. Like, I don't have all the time in the world, and I don't get paid to do it, so I can't necessarily give up. There's some things I can't give up to do things in a different way, but I think people kind of know what they're getting from me now, which is quality and depth. Darryl Clark would keep Jack on his toes. Yeah, I think certainly from my perspective, there's some. I've got to make sure that BOTW stays different from what everybody else is doing. I don't want to just repeat. I don't think there needs to be multiple options of the same thing, which is useful when people which is good in some ways, because Nicky and I have always done things in very, very different ways anyway, but that kind of means that you can get opposite ends of the spectrum, and I think actually in a lot of ways what Nicky and I do kind of complements each other. You can get, if you want one thing, you get your one thing, and if you want a different thing, you get a different thing, kind of thing. I think what the Macca's boys do very well is they're very good at kind of articulating what they do. I want to do interviews in a different style to them, which I think is really good, and it's why they fit in as well. They interview differently from Nicky, and I interview differently from them, and I think those people who do that do good stuff. I still need to sit down and ask Ben Hyde from Zero Pucks Given how he got Kenny Wu from the Mighty Ducks at some point, but there's always things to be good. Either way, last call, because it's nearly 9:30. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half, but that makes sense given the fact it's the last one of the season. Do you think Bartholomew remains with Hull? I personally think that if Matty Davis will have tried his absolute level best to do that, but if he does, more power to him, because I think Matty will have tried really hard to do so. I'm only able to watch 4,000 after the youngest have gone to bed. Well, like I say, Nicky has never shied away from who he is, and I think it is one of the things I like about Nicky, is that he's unapologetically who he is, and you don't have to like that. And him and I have had conversations about how we approach things, and that is what it is. But Nicky, to Nicky's credit, never tries to be anything he's not. Nicky is Nicky, and I think that's one of the reasons why people enjoy that. You have a more supporters view. I mean, I think all of us have a supporters view in that kind of sense, because that's kind of what we are. I think what I try to do, Andrew, is just be a bit more analytical than anybody else. Because I look at I produce what I want to read in that sense, and it's asking some of the awkward questions, and it's looking at certain things through a microscope and other things with a very broad view. So I get that. I try to, but like I say, I don't think I'm a really bad barometer of the average anything. I think just because I'm such an awkward bloke, at the best of times, I have some really weird ideas about things. So it works out well. And you've got a lot of people doing a lot of different things in different places, and I think it all works. Collaboration, not competition, is the thing. And what it is that people have the opportunity to just get what they want where they want it, kind of thing. But yes, I would definitely recommend only watching Nicky's show after the kids are in bed. No, Dave, they haven't announced Coach of the Year. They should do. And I might ask that question of people tomorrow as to what they're doing there. But yeah, I'm not sure something happened there. You listen to what people say. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about the perception versus reality argument. I quite like as well. What do people think, and is it actually accurate? I quite like that. I can just see as well, friends at the Dragon's Den. Young Charlie from up in D-side has chosen his inaugural Dragon's Den MVP and has chosen Andy McKinney, which is very sweet on that front. Really pleased to see that one, young Charlie. Have Romford signed anyone today? Have they signed anyone? Maybe. Have they announced it? That's a different kettle of fish. Let's just have a look there. No, that's Blackburn thanking their sponsors. What are GB's goals to the World Championships? Not get relegated. Simple as that. That's where it is for GB. Don't go down. Rumours are saying Adam Long, but I'll believe it when I see it. Like, he obviously did very well for Romford in the games that he played, and it's not an unreasonable assertion to make. I would again say I believe it when I see it, but obviously he's been sort of sat behind other guys at Guildford. If Paul Dixon decides to go a different direction, there's obviously a chance of Long becoming available, and maybe he just wants a run of playing games now. He hasn't really played. He hasn't played virtually anything this year, so the opportunity to go to Romford would be good for him. I worry about what you do with Ethan James in that front, if that's your 1A, 1B, but I like Ethan a lot. I think Ethan's got a lot of potential. But a 1A, 1, but I mean, Brad Winterbank arguably needs to be able to kind of sort of stay fit for an entire season, and he wouldn't necessarily be in a bad place if he went and got some South 1 time somewhere. But Adam Long Ethan James combo at the back for Romford could be the business there. I'd like that a lot. Yes, Milton Keynes are announcing somebody. I think Jamie said it earlier. Milton Keynes, I think, are announcing Friday night. I want to say, James, either tomorrow night or Friday night, when they've got their supporters thing. And Raiders usually announce their first signing during presentation night, which is this Friday, which would make sense as well. That's fine. Ethan James is quality. He is quality young netminder, superb. Obviously not the biggest of guys, but has very, very good movement, good anticipation. Gets himself square to shots very quickly because he is quite quick as a result. Best hair in the league, bar none. So, be a lot of fun with that. We can have a lot of fun with that one. Tomorrow night, yeah, okay. Why did I think it was Friday? I knew it was like an odd day or something like that. It seems like having a Warzone on a Thursday night with a bunch of hockey players seems like a terrible plan. Like, is everybody having Friday off work? Is that the idea? Either way, though, because time is ticking on, I've got bits and pieces I do need to do because, life is life. Last call, everybody, for the last time in 23-24. So, the What's Current stream going forward. Of course, over the summer, we do reduce ourselves down. We will be every month. Probably what I'll do is go into the last week of the month and do bits and pieces there because that seems like a good place to kind of do a... that seemed like a good idea as a place to kind of do that. We can go over like the month's results and bits and pieces like that. And we'll kind of do it that way. If bigger news comes up, we of course will pop up and do things. Oh, Friday's the golf day. Gotcha. And then of course Saturday you've got Ross Green's testimonial. The like I say, what we'll do is we'll drop down to one a month, and we'll pop up and we'll talk about all the news that's going to happen, any bits and pieces that are going to happen, and just have a bit of an old general hockey chat. So end of May, of course, talk about the end of the NHL playoffs. We'll talk about Worlds. We'll be able to kind of do all of those bits and pieces as well. And then like I say, I don't know what I'm doing next year at the moment. I've obviously got a skill set now that I didn't have at the beginning of the year. I've done a lot more commentary this year than I thought I was ever going to do. So there's obviously avenues open for that. But I said at the end of last year, I'm kind of open to anything, and that remains the same. I've written for Romford this year. I've commentated in a few different places this year. I wrote for the Worlds program last year. I wrote for the Olympic qualifiers. I wrote for the commentary program. And I've been able to do like a lot of really cool stuff. I like what happens for 24-25 for me. I do not know, but it's April. We've got a long time to work that out. A trip north. I might have to do Billingham now, mightn't I? I might have to do Billingham. The amount of people bugging me to go that far north. Maybe that's my weekend. I did Solway. Did Solway in 2023, so maybe the 2024 like November trip, maybe that's the drive to Billingham and seeing what I can find up there. But we'll see what happens. Like there's a long summer to kind of figure out and navigate first. And I turn 40. I turn 40 in July, as does my wife. So there is a lot of celebration to be had as well. I will probably... Do I move a What's Current stream? So the last week of July will be the week of my birthday. Do I do a birthday What's Current stream on the Friday instead of the Wednesday? Maybe not. Might get shot for that one. But a massive thank you to everybody who's kind of hopped on and joined the kind of the What's Current stream bandwagon. Like, this is the nichest of all niche things, like talking about 2nd, 3rd and 4th division British ice hockey. But I've tried to give the NIHL that level of coverage across the board that I don't think it gets anywhere else. People don't do their shows live. They record and they edit in bits and pieces like that. And I like doing this live so we can get things like talking about like signings as they happen, and talking to a board member from EIH as it happens, and like doing a bunch of really, really cool stuff all at the same time. There is a lot of very cool things that we've been able to talk about this year. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity that this show gives me to kind of connect with different people, but as well also just keep waving the flag for levels of British hockey that I don't think necessarily get the respect it deserves. Because it's the Steelers and the Panthers and 7,000 people in their arenas, and it's Belfast in the CHL, but it's also Altrincham versus Sheffield Titans in a League and Cup, dual points game on a Sunday in North 2, and it's it's Kane Russell for the Solent Devils racing around in South 1, just kind of getting himself on an even keel, and it's Matthew Seville in Peterborough getting to play in a playoff final, and Louis Kinniston playing on a line with Sludkowski and Luke Ferrara. Like, how mad is that for a young man in a face cage? And it's Lee Valley and all the various like bits that we laugh about with them, and there's so much. And like I say, there will always be a part of me that always gets angry, and like if my hockey journey with what I do takes me towards doing something in the elite league, then so be it. It is the top level in our country, and I know for me I have to be open to a possibility of things leading me that way, because if I want to keep, where is my progression for what I do, and from a commentary perspective, if there's if an opportunity opens somewhere, then I have to kind of consider that in the same way as anything else. But whatever happens, I've spent so long waving the flag for hockey below the top flight, because the next Ben O'Connor, the next Mark Richardson, the next Liam Kirk, the next Robert Dowd, they're not mythical beings. they're not. They might be a dual national Canadian or American or something like that, but there's kids playing now who are coming through, who are playing like the Power 12 or playing U16s, who will be tomorrow's big GB stars, and they aren't going to leap straight into the Elite League. Although maybe Connolly is the next big thing, and we all forgot about it. But but there is a lot of good young kids who are going to come through the NIHL, and work their way through. Rob Dowd came through Billingham, and then went through the sort of bits and pieces at Sheffield. Like Kieran Long slaved away in the EPL for years. Cole Shudra didn't magic his way into a Sheffield Steelers uniform. He won a title with the Leeds Knights, and he played, an NHL 1 in Sheffield as well. Like, the kids are coming through. The notion that nothing comes from below is fanciful. Caps will be the next Kirk. I'm not 100% convinced that you're wrong there, to be honest. Did you see Rob Dowd's nephew playing for the Stars? I did. Yeah, of course he was there too. But either way, as we kind of close the book on 23-24 this week from a BOTW perspective, and it's only symbolic, of course, because hockey is hockey and there's always hockey being played somewhere. But as we kind of close the book on it, just a massive thank you for joining us across the year here on the stream, because it's fun to keep up to date with things. I like producing it as a show. It's cathartic for me to be able to do these kind of things, and the reason why BOTW started was about getting the thoughts in my head out of my head. And 13 years on, I've just found different and more fun ways to do it, and it's just allowed me to connect with people in a way I didn't think that was possible. And yeah, we are not the biggest show on the biggest stage. Like I said, it's the nichest of the niche, but we're here, and this is what we enjoy, and there is absolutely zero shame in that. And if anybody ever makes you feel bad because you like something that maybe doesn't make sense to them, they ain't worth it. For the last time this season, we call it there. bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source related to all things to do with the NIHL. Curtain down coming tomorrow when I get the opportunity. If I get the opportunity, if it comes out on Friday, you have my apologies now. I've got to get the thoughts out of my head to make it make sense. Otherwise, it's a pointless exercise. We've also got our Hockey Story series, brand new piece coming. Hopefully she'll actually come next week. I've got a few bits and pieces. I've got an interview to finish off the piece on Friday, so that will obviously come. And I'll work that bit out as well. But really pleased with how it's coming together so far. There's lots of good stuff with it. But there's all those bits and pieces that are on the website itself, the old podcast, Dice Hockey to download, donate to Parkinson's UK if you enjoy it. But you've got all of that stuff, including the whole 2023-24 season's worth of stuff over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Facebook.com/bannersonthewall is a place to go on Facebook if you'd like to get your news through your Facebook feed. Because, of course, I'll still be popping up doing stuff over the summer. I've got to keep myself entertained, if nothing else. And I'm getting entertained by writing. So let's do some more writing, shall we? But that's over there. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at BannersOTW is the best place to keep up with me. Of course, I'll be having my little rolling commentary of hockey as we go along over the summer months. And all of those links, if you forget any of them, the great joy of YouTube is they're all down there in the description, as well as the link to our virtual busking hat over at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. You can even commission your own piece if you've got some bits and pieces you'd like me to write about, but you might have to help me with that. But yeah, all of that's there. Like I say, if you've enjoyed what you found over the last year and you want to chuck some money in the hat to keep the lights on and the wheels turning, it's massively appreciated. We're never going behind a paywall. That's just not how I'm wired for these kind of things. But if you like what you see and you just want to help with some of my costs, that'd be appreciated. buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. And yeah, YouTube, of course, because we're here, because it's not just the What's Current stream. There's tons of interviews and bits and pieces like that, and there'll be more to come as well. Hit the subscribe button below, like the video, share the videos, bits and pieces like that. Like I say, we'll be back once a month over the course of the summer, unless the universe explodes. And of course, just don't be a stranger. And thank you very much to Ben there from Drop the Puck, who's jumped into the chat at the last minute. I was genuinely worried what I'd do this year, because it has been weird at times, as you can appreciate. the anchor that I had that kept me sane had gone. And the only option was to make the best of it. And I said in the Coventry programme that some people, of course, it was the Bison or nothing, and that was their right. And some people swapped to only watching the Buffalo, and that is their right. And for me, with the anchor cut off, if I wanted to do this well, I felt I had to walk out into the big wide world and see what I had to see. I like to think I've done a decent job of that. And thank you for seeing the world with me. See you in a month or so, alright? Be happy. And if you can't be happy, then wherever you are, I beg of you, please be safe. As my friend Scotty Watts would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe, and so long till next time. I won't say see you in September. We'll be back before that. Find your hockey where you can find it. Find your happiness where you can find it too. Take care, everybody. I'll see you at the end of May. And that was 23-24.